So, a new Heroes of Might and Magic game was just announced. Olden Era. This has really caught my interest, seeing as how I kind of thought this franchise was dead. But it looks like Ubisoft is going to take another crack at it, which I'm a little skeptical because Ubisoft in the last two entries into the franchise were not very good. However, looking at this game, it looks like it might be a return of old form. I'm not the only one that seems to be thinking that based on the comments I've seen. And I'm sure the name of the actual game is actually supposed to invoke, hey, we're coming back to the old days. What I want to do is take a look at what I thought was good from the trailer and what was maybe not so good, and kind of go from there. First thing I noticed is on the battle maps, we have our hexes back. No more squares, as they had moved to squares, I believe, in Might and Magic 5 and onward, but now we're back to our beautiful hexes. Another thing I immediately noticed is how on the battle map it looks very similar to Might and Magic 3, not just from the hexes, but also how the camera angle is and how the units are placed. Now, I don't know about the art style so much, we'll touch on that in a little bit, but this does definitely try to harken back to Might and Magic 3 more than anything, which is the most popular entry. Another thing we get to see is actually the adventure maps, and to be honest, these also harken back to Might and Magic 3. One of the things that I feel like when I'm looking at it is it's almost like a lot of the things poking out of the base terrain almost looks like it's drawn on, especially if you look at the characters on the screen, like the units that are popping up. They almost look like they are drawn on top of it, which again, it harkens back to the sprites of Might and Magic 3, and I'm probably going to be saying that a lot this video, so forgive me. Another thing that I really liked is that you can see a lot of what's going on the adventure map. You know, you can see some kind of shrine, piles of gems, and other things your hero can go interact with. One of the reasons I actually like seeing all this stuff on the map at this point is with the 3D transition of Heroes of Might and Magic starting with 5, I noticed that the overworld, or adventure map as you would call it, is a lot less interesting at times. You don't see as much treasure and things to go explore, especially with how more zoomed in the camera is and with the way the fog of war is set up. So I really do appreciate them going back to an older version of the map of like Heroes of Might and Magic 3, where you get a lot more sense of what's going on with the map and things you can go do and interact with. I also feel with the 3D transition of Heroes of Might and Magic, the maps weren't as good as they were in Heroes of Might and Magic 3. Now I do like how the maps are, for example, in Heroes of Might and Magic 5 and how they look, but ultimately there was a lot more variety and the maps could be a lot more creative in Heroes of Might and Magic 3, which is something I really appreciate considering how this game is starting to look. Now we've only gotten little previews of it, but I'm hoping that we'll see more of how the maps can turn out and get a better idea of how diverse they can actually be. Now, going off the Steam page, the details we got on this is that this is the next installment for the franchise. Now, I don't know if it's supposed to be a soft reboot, but it kind of feels like that's probably what it's going to be. But they do promise that you'll be able to play in a new solo campaign. There'll be multiple single player maps, plus the randomly generated scenarios which we're used to, and online play. They're also promising a tool to allow us to build our own stories with a map editor tool, which should be available to everyone. But I'm not sure when that will make it in, if it's planning to be made into launch or not. I think the idea ultimately though is that people are going to be able to make their own maps and scenarios and post those online for other people to play and rate. That is something I absolutely adore, because giving players the ability to basically make maps and scenarios and share those with each other can make the game's replayability go up significantly. And a lot of the best games in history are built off the fact that players can make their own content. Now, they did mention that the game is going to launch with 6 factions. 5 of them have already been revealed. The first one's going to be Temple, which are just classic humans. Necropolis are undead and vampires, so that's familiar as well. Sylvan, the forces of nature and faithful, which is also something we know of. Dungeons, dark elves and underground creatures, we're used to those. But the next one is a bit interesting. Hive, demonic insectoids. So it looks like, based on what they've said, Hell Lords have actually subjugated some insectoid race and is using them as like the version of Inferno in this game. I find that kind of interesting, but I'm not sure how I feel about it yet, just because I would prefer to have the old-fashioned Inferno, especially if we're doing maybe a soft reboot of the series. But at the same time, I'm not against maybe a fresher look. I just think we'll need to see how it goes. But I have a feeling a lot of players are going to be missing the original Inferno creatures if they're not in the game. Now, they did say there's going to be a sixth faction, but they haven't revealed it yet. They said that they would reveal it at a later time. But my guess is it's probably going to be some elemental magical themed society similar to the Conflux in Heroes 3 or the Academy in Heroes 5. My reasons for this are, one, I feel like they're a very beloved race and that people would like to see them again, but two, something in the trailer that I feel like may have given us that information was that they show a phoenix at the very end, and the phoenix is one of the main creatures that you get at the end on the Conflux side in Heroes of Might and Magic 3. Now for the things that could be bad about this. For one, Ubisoft. I don't think I need to say much else, but we don't know what Ubisoft could do to this game or how much support they're going to actually give it, or even worst case, try to microtransaction the hell out of it. Which to a bunch of boomer Heroes of Might and Magic players, none of them are going to take very well to it. Expansions are fine, but anything beyond that, like cash shops and skins, that's going to really hurt any longevity this game's going to have with the core fan base. Another concern I have is actually with the graphical art style direction they went in. I do like that it's like a 2D HD type vibe, but the thing that kind of bothers me is just how they went about it with the cell shading graphics. It doesn't really feel like Heroes of Might and Magic to me. It might grow on me later, but it just, the way it looks and the way it's come off so far, it's hard to believe it's a Might and Magic game. I didn't really think it was until I read the title. I actually had to do a double take and some research as well to make sure it was a Heroes of Might and Magic game because the visuals just threw me off so badly. I thought it might have been a mobile game that they just plastered a name on top of. My last concern is that it's actually going to be an early access game on Steam. Now, I'm someone that has a very interesting rule where I just don't really buy early access games. It's really hard to convince me to buy one. Doesn't matter if people are reviewing the game very well. It's just that there's too many instances where people buy a game, say it's really good, and it's in early access, so it's only going to get better. And then the developers make all this money, and they just either never stop it from being in early access, or they end up never going anywhere, and they kind of maybe run off with the money. That's kind of my biggest concern. Now, being that this is a Ubisoft title, I don't really think that'll happen. But one of my things is that with it being early access, it could also be a positive because they could actually work on the feedback that Heroes of Might and Magic fans have on it and try to improve upon the formula as much as they can. My final concern with that too is they might end up in a situation where when we first launch the game, it doesn't go through the Ubisoft launcher, but then after the game launches, we might have to start dealing with Ubisoft launcher, and we know how that went with Helldivers 2, and it drove off a ton of players and actually was detrimental to the game. So if that happens, especially to the old school Heroes of Might and Magic players, they may very well not want to play anymore. But that's about all I have for you. It was a short, tiny little trailer and a Steam page. I know that developers are doing a Q&A here shortly, so we'll be on the lookout for that to get more information. And I will be watching this with great interest. I don't know if I'm going to buy into the early access period or not yet. We'll see what happens. But I will say I am looking forward to seeing if they are able to bring this series back from the grave. But with all that being said, if you liked the video, please make sure to like and subscribe. Have a good rest of your day, and take care. Bye-bye.